Welcome to Spotlight. I'm your show host, Barbara Ragland, and we have a very special guest today. He's the president of the NAACP, the oldest civil rights organization in the United States. And we're just so pleased to have him, and he's going to give us some insights about the civil rights struggle and the structure of the civil rights organization. So welcome to Spotlight, Mohammed Ansari. We're so glad to have you.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored and humbled to be here this morning, and thank you very much for inviting me. And if I can begin by just talking about the NAACP a little bit. It began in 1909, as you know, and it really began as a result of a riot that took place in Springfield, Illinois. And prior to that, there were a number of African Americans being lynched every year. That was like 60, 50, 60 African Americans just being lynched at will. And there wasn't very much being done about it because the African Americans, we didn't have any protection as far as the law is concerned. We didn't have anyone to really represent us in the courts. We didn't have anyone to really speak up in our behalf. So the racist whites were able to just do whatever they wanted to do to us. So after that riot in Springfield, Illinois, where a number of African Americans were killed and hundreds and thousands were driven out of that city, they had to leave to run for their lives. A number of folks met in New York, and incidentally, these were white folks who met in New York and said, we've got to do something about this race situation. You see, and it's fortunate that God has created us all with a conscience, and there are people of all colors who have a feeling for humanity. Yes. And there were white folks who had a feeling for what was happening to African American folks. And they called in some African Americans like W.E.B. Du Bois and some others, and they sat down and talked, and the NAACP was formed, and it really was birthed February the 12th in 1909. They chose that date, which was Lincoln's birthday, for the birth of the NAACP. And the NAACP has been fighting the battle for African Americans and other folks of color ever since that time. And even during Dr. King's struggles in the South, the NAACP was there with him and marching and involved. And one of the things that the NAACP was very well known for was being able to fight in the courts. We were able to get young, intelligent, smart lawyers like Thurgood Marshall. He was a young man, young lawyer, and there was another lawyer by the name of Houston who was before Thurgood, and he was a very bright young attorney back during that time. And they was able to go into the courts and use the law of the land to get rights for African American people.
That is just wonderful. Do all the cities in the country have branches of the NAACP?
Well, not necessarily all cities, but I would say all major cities have a branch. And like the Greater Hartford branch of the NAACP, We cover all of the towns that's connected with Hartford. Now, if a town became big enough and had enough members and thought that it wanted to form a branch and get a charter and get the approval from national, then they could establish a branch in that particular town.
Since lynchings, for the most part, have been eliminated, what are some of the things that you do now? What are some of your tasks that you do?
Well, I will focus locally because I think it's important for people to know what the NAACP is involved in and locally in Hartford and Greater Hartford. We have there's a couple of major things that we're focusing on right now. Number one really is the civic engagement. We're focusing on voter registration, voter education, and get out to vote. That's a major thrust that the NAACP is involved in all over the country right now. Coming up for this election, coming up this year, we're not telling people who to vote for because we're nonpartisan. We can't do that. But we want to make sure that every qualified person is registered and is able to vote, and we want to encourage those folks to vote and assist them in getting to the polls. So we have laid out a plan of how we're going to canvass each neighborhood, street by street, zip code by zip code, knocking on doors and covering each house and apartment on each street to check and see if folks are registered in that particular facility, dwelling or house or an apartment. And if they're not, we want to register them. And if they are, we want to encourage them to get out to vote. If people need rides to the polls on that day, we're equipped to do that, get them to the polls. And another thing that we're focusing on now is health. Health is a major concern, especially in the African American community. You find that so many of our people are suffering from diabetes, suffering from high blood pressure, they're suffering from high cholesterol, they're suffering from prostate cancer, they're suffering from so many health issues, and many of them don't even know that they have these problems because they haven't been checked. Some of them don't have insurance, and some just doesn't really like to go to a doctor. You know, and if they don't have a physician or a health care person, then if they end up in an emergency room, it's such a long waiting period that people are discouraged from going. So we have a health committee that is holding educational seminars in the community where we're inviting people. We have a Dr. Gary Rule is the chair of our health committee, and we have a very, very good committee of members that are working with him. And folks that are working with him don't necessarily have to be members of the NAACP, even though we encourage them to join the NAACP, but we do have some folks who are part of the committee who are not members of the NAACP. The St. Francis Hospital, they have joined on with us. Community Health Service, they are working with us. And we're having educational seminars in the community so that we're educating people about the different health issues that are affecting them and a lot of other people. We're planning a major health fair this summer. We're hoping to have it in June, and we want to have it in Kinney Park, and and we want to have a big thing where we will actually do physicals and everything on site there. So
Right.
that's something that we're planning to do, and we're very deeply involved in that.
That's really very, very important. And I've had people here that talked about diabetes and breast cancer, and also people from the Red Cross talking about how there's a problem with African Americans not donating enough blood because we have a different strain of blood, and people really need that contribution. And so all those things are really important for us to be aware of. So what kind of publicity things are you doing to make people aware that this fair is coming?
Well, the community coordination chair, her name is Sherry Fraser. She's the chairperson of the community coordination committee. And she's getting in touch with the public access television station in Hartford so that we're trying to get as much publicity as we can without paying a lot of money for it because we don't have a lot of money. So she's in touch with the public access station in Hartford. We also have been in touch with the North End Agents newspaper, who have agreed to run announcements in their paper for us. And the Hartford Inquiring News is another source of information that will get out information for us. And these papers, these newspapers would do it at no cost, just as a service to the community.
And since this is the Greater Hartford NAACP, and most of us, like Windsor and Bloomfield and all of the towns, do have public access television, community television, would you contact them and let them know too, like you're telling us, and would you let us know when the time comes, or make her aware of that, or does she know that?
Well, what I will do now, after being here today, is make sure that Sherry gets in touch with the folks here at this station and give them the necessary information so that it can be announced up here in Windsor as well. And we need to do the same thing in Bloomfield, West Hartford, East Hartford, and all of the other
South
towns
Windsor,
that have public access television.
It's a great tool.
Yes.
It really is, to keep people involved, and that's why we're so glad you came, because people need to know about the NAACP. A lot of times people just think about Martin Luther King, but you were around, we were around, Daddy was around long before Martin Luther King on the battlefield, and I think that we're going to have to keep struggling, and and one good thing about the NAACP and the Urban League and everything, it doesn't have a color. It's just people working together to try to make things better for everyone. But I was going to ask you, Minister Ansari, about this new push. I think the Attorney General stopped it in South Carolina about trying to prevent people from voting and, stop them from getting involved in voter registration. And I think 13 states or more. Can you tell us about that?
Well, yes, but fortunately, that hasn't happened in Connecticut.
No.
So we're fortunate here that even in Connecticut, you really, if you don't even have a picture ID here in Connecticut,
You can vote.
you can still vote. If you have something with your address, like a bill or a letter stating that you live at a certain address, then you can use that. And even if you have to sign it's a particular ballot that you sign, so that if there's any question, then they can verify that you are who you say you are. But fortunately, here in Connecticut, we don't have that problem. But I think that the move is being made to disqualify or prevent a number of us from voting.
Yeah.
Because, as you know, that was one of the NAACP's major battles early on.
Yes, I know.
Was to register and get our folks the right to vote, because at one time we didn't have the right to vote, and we were citizens of this country. We were paying taxes and like everyone else, but we didn't have the same rights that other folks had.
Yeah.
And the NAACP was in the South and anywhere that African Americans were having some difficulty registering and being allowed to vote, the NAACP was there fighting that battle. And we're in the battle now.
Yes.
In those states that are instituting these new procedures to make it more difficult for people of color to access the voting booth, the NAACP is challenging, and those they're fighting it as we speak. So the NAACP has always been fighting for the rights of folks who are not able to fight for themselves. They don't have the resources or the know-how to fight for themselves, and the NAACP has always been there in the forefront fighting for them.
I know I saw on television, was it yesterday, that Newt Gingrich wants to be invited to the NAACP convention or to speak in front of the NAACP, and I'm like, really? You know? How often do you meet nationally?
Well, we have a national convention every year, where everyone can attend the convention. A lot of members try to make it there. I was at the last convention, which was in Los Angeles, and it's a great experience. A lot of things happen, but the NAACP board meets every quarter.
Okay.
And they meet in different locations around the country. So
who's on the board?
Well, here in Connecticut we have Scott Xdale.
Okay.
He's the state conference president of the NAACP in Connecticut, and he is on the board of directors of the NAACP. There's a lot of board members. It's like 67.
Oh, okay.
So it's a big board.
And what do they do? Decide what focus you're going to take or what direction you're going to take, because they're representing different parts of the country? What is their role?
Yes, exactly what you just mentioned. They come together to discuss what is going on in any particular area of the country, what issues needs to be addressed, and how will we address those issues. There may be some resolutions that have been passed that have made some changes in how we do things. Whatever the concerns are of the membership.
All right.
Then the board will meet and address those concerns.
Do you have, how do you feel about some of the things that the NAACP can address in this greater Hartford area? And do you get young people involved?
Yes. Well, one of the things that motivated me to accept to run for the presidency, because I really wasn't looking to run for president of the Greater Hartford branch, but I was asked and encouraged to do so by some of the members who have been around and been involved in NAACP for quite some time. And I agreed to run for the presidency. And one of my commitment was to get more young people involved in the branch. I feel that if the NAACP, not only in Greater Hartford, but across the country, that we're going to grow and continue to be a viable, meaningful organization, we must get young people involved.
I agree.
And I know in the Hartford branch, all of the board members and all of the officers were older, 60 and 60 or better. And we didn't have any younger people. When I say young, I'm speaking of 30, 35, 40, 45, and that and that's not really young, but
No.
it's young when you're comparing that with 60, 65, and 70. So I started getting young people involved, and I've been fortunate to accomplish part of that, and I'm still working on it. I have a young treasurer now who's a very young, bright young man. He's in his mid-40s, very smart and very energetic, has a lot of energy, and he want to do things, and we're letting him go. And I have an assistant secretary now who is, she's maybe in her, I would say, late 20s, maybe early 30s now, and she's coming in ready to do work. She's hitting the ground running already, asking for things to do.
Yeah, because they know all about the computers and the internet and how to get things done quickly. And how to
Exactly.
communicate with a lot of people by touching a button and whatever.
Yes.
It's so important.
So this is what I'm doing, and I'm still recruiting for young people. I got my son-in-law involved. He's a very smart young man also, and he's involved in the health committee, and he's assisting Dr. Rule and doing a lot of work there. So yes, we are reaching out to get young people involved, and that is the tone of the NAACP nationally. This is happening nationally, getting young people involved. Yes.
I think that's it's so important. And like you said, it's been around so long that the young people don't know very much about it. And you got to figure out how to get them involved and how to let them know. And it's a difficult thing to do, don't you think? It's a challenge.
Yes, see, and we have to, us, myself included, us older, folks, we can't feel threatened by the young people, but we need to bring them in and mentor them and assist them and help them, and let them go, and not feel threatened that they're taking my place, and what will I do? I won't have anything to do, but we'll always have something to do.
That's true.
We can always assist them and help them, but at some point in time, if the agency is going to continue to live, we have to prepare the young people to take our place, because there will come a time when we just won't be able to be there.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's great.
yes.
So your focus is going to be on health primarily and whatever. Since the time that that NAACP started, and it's a broad stroke, but what kind of progress do you think has been made? How do you think Martin Luther King would feel about what's going on now, given that he had a dream?
Yes. Well, I think on the one hand, I think Dr. King would probably be shocked that we have a African-American president in the White House now, and African-American family occupying the White House. I think it would be shocked, because I don't think he visioned that happening
No.
You know, but he was pushing for a lot of things, and but I think a lot of the things that Dr. King was fighting for and really advocating for, and what he actually gave his life for. You know, I don't think we have accomplished those things yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're still fighting for some of the same things that he was fighting for, and that was 44 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
better jobs, you know, equal paying job,
Yeah.
you know, equal rights.
Yeah.
You know, like we're going through this, as we were talking earlier about this voter thing, how
Yeah.
they're trying to make moves now to disqualify us from being able to vote. These are some of the things that Dr. King was involved in when he was among us.
You're trying to turn back the clock.
So he would be involved, I think, in this struggle today to make things to make things happen, because God says, stand up for justice. You know, even against your own self, be
That's
just.
true.
So that means that you know, we have to fight injustice wherever we find it. We have to fight it,
Yeah.
and that's what the NAACP is doing, and it's going to continue to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you enjoy your job? You sound like you do.
Yes, I do. You know, I got into this position, and you know, it requires some work. But fortunately, I just retired from my job as the executive director of the Open Hearth Association, and
Okay.
and since I'm retired, the NAACP, the president, has given me you know, a lot to do, and I enjoy doing what I do. I really do, and that is trying to help people and being involved in meetings and discussing things and trying to influence folks to make some changes. I'm not a real fiery type person. I'm kind of quiet, and, you know, but I try to make my point, and I try to get people to listen to another point of view, and I've been pretty successful
Yeah.
so far.
How long were you at the Open Hearth?
I was there for 20 years. You know, held a number of positions there. And,
What does the Open Hearth do besides wood? I think of them. We got a truckload of wood from my son that lives in West Africa. He didn't have a heat,
Yeah.
and he had to get a truckload of wood from them and whatever. What is that? Something like the Salvation Army? What is the Open Hearth?
Well, see, so many people know the Open Heart by the wood, you know, because it does sell a lot of wood,
Yeah.
and right now it's selling wood because of the winter. But it's a shelter.
Okay.
It has a shelter for homeless folks. It has a 30-bed shelter, and it also has a transitional living program for men who are homeless and need a longer place to stay other than just the short-term shelter stay. And they can stay there up to 2 years in the transition living program, and it's also a halfway house for men who are coming out of prison. It's a work release program for men who are coming out of prison. There are 44 inmates housed there who are being released from prison. So and there's another 43 men in the transition living program. So it's a four-story building. And it's a big facility, and it prepares all the meals on site. You have a first-class cook, big dining room, kitchen. A lot of the men learn how to cook and prepare meals while they're there at the Open Hearth. It's a very good program. I worked there, like I said, 20 years, and I enjoyed every bit of it.
And that's a lot of times when our young men come out of prison, they don't have places to go. Does someone recommend the Open Hearth, or they volunteer or say, I want to go to the Open Hearth? How would they get involved in that program?
Well, it happens, all of the above. Sometimes they're recommended by people, and other times folks just say, I want to go to the Open Heart because they've heard about it from someone else. Yeah. Like a lot of people know me in Hartford. I've been in Hartford for pretty much all of my life until I was six years old, and I've been here. So a lot of people know me, and they know I work at the Open Heart, so you know, and they've heard about it. So I want to go to Open Heart because I hear that's a good program, you know. Brother Muhammad is over there, and he's doing good things. So,
Okay. That is really wonderful. Do you have anything else that you like to say to our Win TV audience about your experience or your recommendations or your feelings about the NAACP and about community involvement and how we can get closer to each other and work with each other and help somebody and help each other?
well, I would just like to say to your television audience that the NAACP is in need of help, volunteers. It's all volunteers. All the work gets done by volunteers.
Yeah.
We don't get paid, and it's a good way to give back. What God has blessed you with. Getting involved in NAACP is a good way to give back to someone else by getting involved in an organization that have been around for 103 years.
Yes.
And to help that organization do the work that it does is a good way to give back for some of the blessings that God have blessed the people of this community with. People living up in Windsor and in this area are living pretty good, a lot of them. And many of them are members of the NAACP, but they don't attend meetings, they don't get involved.
Where are the meetings held?
The meetings are held at the Senior Center on Coventry Street in Hartford at 7 p.m. The first Tuesday of every month from 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. We're there the first Tuesday of every month, and that is the general membership meeting. And we have the executive committee meeting, the executive board meeting, the third Monday of the month, which we had one last night at Union Baptist Church on Main Street.
And that's been forever, huh?
And that is from 7 to 9, and that's open to anyone can come. You just can't vote on anything if you're not an executive board member.
And the cost, I know there has to be a fee. I know
it's $30 a year to be a member, which is not a lot of money. $30
not at all.
A year.
I remember sometimes I paid and didn't get a membership card. I didn't.
Yeah, and that's something that I promised to straighten out, but that's not really all on Hartford. It's on national.
National, I know.
Because we send it in to national, and then national is responsible for sending out the cards to people. And sometimes they get a little backed up and they're a little slow getting those cards out. But I've been calling national and trying to get them to be a little more, efficient in doing that.
If somebody wanted to find out how to join, what numbers? Can you give us a telephone number or email address that they could get in touch with you or the NAACP?
Yes, they can call me. I'm the president, Muhammad Ansari. My number is area code 860-922-1160. Or they can email me at abdul-shahid@sbcglobal.net. And we're also online. You can go online. We have a website. It's greaterhartfordnaacp.org.
Okay.
You don't have to put the www in.
No.
Just type in greaterhartfordnaacp.org, and the website will pop up. And then there are different. You can, if you want to know about membership, you can click on membership, and then membership form will appear in front of you, and you can fill it out and print it, and then send it to us.
Okay. All right. Minister Ansari, it's just been a thrill and an education for me to know that the NAACP is in good hands, because I feel as though they're in good hands because they have you at the helm. And it's really, really important. This organization, it has to stay. We just have to keep going, and our young children need to know about it. My grandson in West Hartford needs to know about it, and he loves to do reports. And so when I get this tape, I'm going to share it with him. although he was probably he goes to Faith, so he's probably at Faith yesterday. So I think it's really, really important. And I'm so glad you came. And I hope you'll come back again and give us any kind of information you have or any kind of, push that you want to make. You can come in and talk about it. Just call me or call Jenny and tell her, you want to be on the program. We've got some things going on. And especially the fair, as it gets closer to the time, maybe in May or something, you might want to bring someone that's in charge or send someone that's in charge of the fair so that they can really talk about what's happening and what's going to happen. And this program has a big audience and people watch it because they can watch it, on Comcast and on demand in a lot of different ways. So they don't actually have to live in Windsor, but the information gets to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So I want to thank you so much for coming. It's been an honor.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure being here.
Yes. We've had Minister Muhammad Ansari here, and he's a wonderful man. And the NAACP has been around for over 100 years. I bet a lot of you didn't know that. So now you know, and you know the history of it. And so when you think about Martin Luther King, before Martin Luther King, there was the NAACP. And further, all during February, we're going to talk about Black history. And this is certainly Black history, but it's also an integrated history because there are a lot of different nationalities that are members of the NAACP. So until next time, this is Barbara Ragland saying, be good to yourself and others.